All right, welcome to everyone who's joined us today for this month's Cultural Wisdom webinar. Again, my name is Sean DeBurke, and I'm Director of Intercultural Training at RW3 Culture Wizard, and I'll be producing our session today. Lakshmi Chowdhury is our presenter, and she'll be discussing the topic of working effectively with India. And over the next 60 minutes, she'll take us through an exploration of several critical Indian cultural values and how they impact the way that we work with India, along with some practical advice that we can start to incorporate into our daily work activities to ensure success. Now, before we begin, I'd like to briefly familiarize you all with the GoToWebinar platform that we're using today. We have a large number of callers, so your phones have been muted to reduce background noise. We do want to encourage participation, so you can ask questions at any time using the questions area in the GoToWebinar panel that you see on the right-hand side of your screens. There will be points during the webinar where our presenter will ask you to respond to open-ended questions in addition to polls. So please be sure to respond to those as soon as we project them. And as always, we will make the presentation, in addition to a recording of this webinar, available within a week after our session today. Now a little bit about who we are. RW3 Culture Wizard was founded in 2001 by Michael Schell and Charlene Solomon, who have been involved in intercultural training, global talent development, and global mobility for over 30 years. Many of you know us because you have access to Culture Wizard, our flagship online learning platform, through your organizations. But in general, we serve global organizations with intercultural learning, online and instructor-led, to support their effective interactions in a global and multicultural environment. With that, I'd like to go ahead and pass the ball to Lakshmi so she can introduce herself and so that we can get underway.
Thank you, Sean, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone participating. My name is Lakshmi Chowdhury, and I've been working in this field for the last 11, 12 years, and I have been working right across the different cultures, almost 28 cultures, at the sharp end of business, both in Europe and in Asia Pacific, and of course USA. My parent company when I used to work full-time was the McGraw-Hill companies. And I work across all the sectors of industry, helping companies to address the gaps of the cultural challenges and how we can strategize to work more effectively across the different countries. India is one of the countries I work quite often with, and I also travel to India, as I do with other countries in the world, to address the gaps of culture with the different companies who are working with India. And when I go to India, I work with the companies in India to address the gaps they have with the Western organizations in Europe, Britain, or USA. I speak 4 Indian languages, and it, of course, helps me when I'm out there. And I'd like to welcome you all to this. It's a 1 hour or less than 1 hour session. I'm going to be picking up some of the most strategic or most key points to share with you and to see how we can work more effectively. The goals of this meeting is going to be that we're going to be increasing your awareness of the key values, although I'm going to be touching only a few of them, and how those impact on business behaviors. Also comparing your preferences with the home country values with the Indian values and identify what those cultural gaps can be in work style. And of course, explore the ways to bridge the cultural gaps and develop strategies for even greater business success. So I would like to the agenda for the day will be the roots of the Indian culture, some of the key dimensions of the business culture, and what are those strategies with India one can have for success, and then of course you can have your personal planning, action planning to be more successful. The question I have is, what kind of interactions and work activities do you do with India on an ongoing basis? And could you kindly submit your questions in the questions area now?
Thank you, Lakshmi. So as she said, I'd like to encourage all of you to please share a little insight with us around the nature of your work with India. If you go to the questions area of GoToWebinar, you can submit your responses there. Devya is telling us here that she has client meetings with a staffed office in India. Mm-hmm. Marcia tells me that her line manager is from India.
Okay.
Dominique tells us that he has people working for him who are from India. Neil tells us that he worked for a small Indian-owned company for about 2.5 years and now works with freelancers in India. Lisa says that we are opening a staffed office in India, and Jenny has daily interactions with finance and payroll in India. Arlene supports individuals on a business team in India and supports leaders that have employees in India. And finally, one more, Andreas tells us that he collaborates with colleagues in India on a frequent basis. Thank you so much for your input.
So Sean, they do have quite a lot of interactions on a daily basis. Of course, I'm sure they're going to have, if I could just speak to them, they could tell me all the challenges they're having, but certainly they're going to be covering some of the challenges. And of course, to start that, I'd like to share with you how culture works in the first place. So before we even understand another culture, we need to understand ourselves, meaning, well, who are we? What are our cultural values? And it is very important to understand that we may seriously misinterpret business situation in other cultures if we always evaluate them solely in terms of our own values, expectations, and behaviors. So as Stephen Covey says, we see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to seeing it. And I'm sure this has been something which, without awareness about the different cultures you work with, this would be a true fact for all of us when we are working across cultures without awareness training. And normally what happens with that is we assess everybody's behavior based on our value assumptions, which are, of course, are developed within us from our own host culture. And if those behaviors are not in tune with our own values, we feel it's wrong. If they are, then, of course, the similarities doesn't pose as big problems. And vice versa, the other cultures are looking at our behavior based on their value assumptions. And this leads to a crash. And this is what's happening on a daily basis when people are working across the cultures, as the world is a global village, when cross-cultural conflicts are occurring. And this is mainly because of this reason of our behaviors, of course, are different from the values they may have. So what I'd like to share with you is, when we are analyzing understanding the cultural norms, we need to, first of all, start from a generalization point of view, because we don't know anything different, but then create awareness through the awareness training, understanding it, perhaps using RW3 with their culture wizard and some training. Of course, the objective is to understand the culture on an objective way rather than judging it. Because no culture is right or wrong. They're just different. And different doesn't make anyone less or more. Different tells us that something is different. We need to recognize it through the awareness training we will have and respect it, and then modify and adapt our new behaviors of working together to be even more effective. And of course, the stereotype images can be very dangerous, so one should be very careful. And all cultures have a norm, which is the normal distribution curve. But then, as you know, the normal distribution curve has edges as well. So there will be differences. And one big thing we have to always remember is it's the individual difference we are working with and not the complete cultures. And so we're not tarring everybody with the same cultural norm, because within those cultures we will have people who are very different because their worldviews have been shaped through different experiences. I would like to now then talk about what are those roots of the Indian culture. India is a huge continent. Most of Western Europe fits into it, and the diversity is great, from a contrast of weather to food to people. And just to give you some statistics, it has 28 states, 7 union territories, and India has north and south. So the northern part of India, the languages have evolved from Sanskrit, and technically speaking, all of India has around 354 languages. However, 18 of them are official languages, English being one of them. And the southern part, it's the Dravidian languages, and the southern part, I would say, are states of Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. And these are independent of the north. So the common language which connects the Indians together from north, south, east, west is actually in English or Hindi. So that is something where you will find that many of the people you're working with do speak quite a lot of English. With of course, we really have a difference in accent or speed in that. Okay, the changing face of India, how it's changing, because it is a global, working globally now, and it's growing in its importance on economic level as well. 50% of the population is around 25. There will be by 2050, 550 million teenagers. So I would say the pyramid is correct in India. However, we do have still 35% illiteracy rate. But the irony is this world's second largest pool of trained scientists and engineers come from India. And it is one of the world's oldest civilization, but yet very, very rapidly modernizing. I believe there are 5 pillars growing in India at the same time. They are the urban and the rural India, the traditional and the modern India, and westernized India. And all of them are at conflict points in certain situations. And this is what we sometimes notice, not only on a generational gap level, but otherwise when you're visiting. The cultural shift in business dynamics has occurred. And the old school, I would like to share with you, is the power distance. Some of these norms are still true. Power distance is quite great. Titles, rank, status is really important. Harmony, so avoiding any form of conflict is important. So you might get situations where a lot of yeses are being said. Humility is really appreciated, with pride and honor, where one has to preserve people's faces. Face means personal dignity and personal worth. And uncertainty avoidance. So knowing that we need to be really very, how would I say it, we need to contextualize things and be very specific in what we are trying to share with them when they're helping us with our work. The new school, on the other hand, well, Indian is very much a global citizen today. They're traveling everywhere and working everywhere. Very entrepreneurial in their spirit, and you notice that all the time, and especially with the growth of the economy. I would like to say, even in the recession, it's growing between 5 and 6%, and 4 or 5 years ago, it was in between the 9 and the 10%. Independent thinkers. Materialism is creeping in big time because money, and I would like to add, there are around 350 million middle classes, and therefore they have a lot more wealth now, and they need to show it off by being materialistic. And lots of designer outfits are there. All the big malls are growing in the big metros, and people are spending money. Financial freedom is there because many of the young generation have jobs whereby their monthly income is equivalent to around 6 months of their father's income. And this economic shift is even bringing in the power shift in families. And of course, technology is big time the influence in doing all this. In fact, if just to share with you, around 1 million mobile phones are sold per month in India. So what are those key dimensions, and how do they work in the Indian workplace? I would like to start by saying that these are just some of the key dimensions. There are many, many more, and I'm just going to be concentrating on these 3, which are the hierarchy, where deference to authority is practiced. The family is very important, as I said earlier. And in fact, the old school, I would say, the family model, sorry, the company model is very much based on family situation. So managers are like maternalistic figures, and the staff are like inverted commas children as such. And the loyalty to the employer, to the manager, is complete, and vice versa. The employer is totally responsible for that individual's growth and progress. Relationship is, I call it the trump card. it brings in a lot of things, and in which case harmony is crucial and the respectful interactions are very important. So it's not just task-driven. The business is very much based on relationships, and people work through that, and the relationships can bring in all the results you want, even when it becomes impossible. And the final one is indirect and subtle communication, where at times you may have to work with context, meaning explaining the whole situation in a holistic way, and which may take time. And sometimes we work in this Anglo-Saxon culture, or in the Western economy, that time is money, money is time. I don't have time for such things. But when you do spend the time in explaining everything in greater context, you'll get better results. And so sometimes we can underestimate the significance, importance of management involvement in projects. And also we may also underestimate where collaboration or creative processes from the junior teams may not come forth because individual accountability may be lacking. Or we may delegate too soon and they wouldn't have had the experience, unlike what you've been doing for many years. So making sure that they understand fully will be very important. Mentoring and guiding employees is very important. And be aware that please do share a lot more information and processes and do not delegate too fast with insufficient information. We come to, these are the things, sorry, I should have put this slide on earlier, but these are some of the common risks which I've just mentioned. I would like to now then take you to the culture calculator. Some of you may have already used this, and you would know how useful it is when you see the gaps being very big. Where the gaps are less, that means the similarities exist, and bigger gaps means differences are bigger, and therefore they may be posing you challenge. But what is important to do is, wherever you want to look at where the gap is the biggest, click to the analysis, and this really allows you to understand the implications of this gap in your business interactions and effectiveness. And it also then gives you guidance as to what specific things you can do to bridge those gaps and increase your effectiveness in the workplace. Okay, so this is what's going to show. It's going to show you what you can do. And now we have another poll. So the question I have is, which dimensions do you find most challenging when you're working with India? Is it the hierarchy, the relationships, communication, when you get too many yeses and nobody says no, or people don't speak up, or any other? Please use the question box.
Thank you, Lakshmi. So we've got about 40% of you have voted. We'll give you another few seconds to tell us what dimension you find most challenging when working with India. All right, let's close the poll and take a look at the results here. Lakshmi, it looks like 75% of our participants today tell us that communication is the most challenging dimension of working with India, followed by other. I'm going to take a look at some of the responses here, but only 6% say that relationships is a challenge, and only 5% tell us, 8% tell us that hierarchy is a challenge. So overwhelmingly, communication is the strongest difficulty here. But one person here tells us, Pierre tells us that communication or lack thereof is a challenge, and other, Lisa tells us that governmental bureaucracy is a challenge for her.
Okay, very good. I'm not very surprised, Sean, that communication has come out so large as a percentage. I guess this is very much related to the language in the sense of perhaps speed, perhaps accent, and also at times silence, or nobody speaks because the hierarchy is sitting in that room, so the brainstorming doesn't really occur the same way we would expect here. And communication, by the way, just to add further, not only do we have communication issues of understanding the Indian colleagues, but they also have equal difficulty understanding us. And if our mother tongue is not English, generally we tend to speak at 220 words a minute, and the non-native listener of that language hears it at 110. So we need to also look at our language and how are we speaking and how clear are we on our language. And we should be able to speak with shorter sentences and perhaps simpler words so that everybody's on the same page. Just to share with you something, Sean, this morning I had an issue where I couldn't understand somebody's language when I was trying to speak because they were speaking too fast. And the clarity wasn't there, and I could not even answer that question. So I had to ask 3 or 4 times. So one of the big tips I want to give everyone, I think, is that not only do we become clear in our language, enunciating the words correctly, but also pausing, because people whose mother tongue isn't English will need to hear you, understand you, interpret perhaps in their own language, before they can give you an answer. And we tend to rush people into wanting an answer without realizing that people need thinking. And these were my experiences when I worked in Asia for 5 years in many of the cultures I worked in. And I realized that I had to observe much more silence but also pauses in my communication. So let's move on to the bureaucracy, by the way, just to share that. The bureaucracy is something, India is very bureaucratic because everybody is trying to only do their role and responsibility. So it's really, there are lots of compartments there. And at times we think people do not step outside of the box. It's not because they can't do it or they haven't got the intelligence. It's purely the way the structures are set up. Everybody is just responsible for the type of role they are doing, and they will not step out of it in case of mistakes and losing face. I would like to now go into hierarchy, and I'm sure you've all found out that these two contrasts are where, you know, in the hierarchical side, the leadership is more authoritative and very hands-on, and basically there is a lot of deference and respect for the superiors. On the egalitarian side, we emphasize equality. The leadership is much more participative and more coach-like. But I'd like to share with you how the role of the manager differs. So I'm going to concentrate more on the Indian side because I'm sure you know about the West quite a lot. Well, basically, in the Indian manager's role, again, this is talking about the norm and not the individual differences, because you may have come across some individual differences here. Managers tend to direct the process. You know, they get involved at every stage, and sometimes we call it micromanagement. Managers are supposed to have all the answers, and they are the ones who get the agreement for the decision. And basically, leaders are making the decisions, and the subordinates are following the rules. Leaders delegate responsibility, but not authority. So when you're looking for information to come back to you or managing a deadline, one of the tips I could share with you would be to really look at, ask them for the organization chart, because the decision-making is at another level, accountability yet is another level, and therefore your colleague may be saying to you, it's coming, it's on its way, but for 2 weeks you don't get anything, and then you are kind of probably tearing your hair, wondering what has happened. And at that point, the colleague tells you, oh, but my boss has been away. So we need to start asking more questions, which we are not used to, because in this part of the world, when we do ask for something, if I'm not able to give because my manager is away, I will say that quite openly. So you will be able to manage the expectations of the work better. But over there, they may not say it. So sometimes we have to ask a bit more than we're used to. And decisions, of course, sometimes take longer, only because the hierarchy is involved, and it may have to be approved further upwards rather than the individual who's got the accountability as well as responsibility. So what are some of these implications we get? Some of it I've started touching on already, that everybody's role is totally in a compartment where they do not step out of it, and therefore it's purely for not making mistakes, or they may not be allowed, and the face comes into it, which is your personal dignity and personal worth. And the expectations of the manager are that the subordinates are not at an equal level, but they need to work from the direction they're getting, and they're very process-driven. That stems from a lot of, although it's changing, stems from the education system, which has been up till now very much on a rote learning basis. And also, who talks to who is very important. So at what level are you getting the information? You may have to make the relationships at different levels, but in the Indian hierarchy, the decision-making will be at a most senior level. Relationships and versus transactional type of way of working. In many parts of our Western world, we feel the emphasis very much on task and the goals over relationships. It's not that we don't have relationships. Of course we have, but we build them over time as we get to know people, but the task starts getting done. In India, to be honest, I would say relationships are very critical. I sometimes call it prerequisite. Doesn't mean that Indian people will not work otherwise, but it just lubricates. It's a lubricating oil which facilitates the business much faster. And therefore, I would say this helps you to achieve a lot. I felt that whenever I had built if I'd invested time, I got more out of it. And in fact, when things were not going to come in, they would tell me ahead of time, so I could manage my expectations with my bosses as well above. And so, you know, getting to know them a little bit more than the business only would be very good. Looking at what you gave as statistics earlier, that, you know, the relationship is not a big issue for you, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But creating those networks and connections are going to be very important, because connections, again, lubricate. It's a lubricating oil for advancing business. And also, even at times in the government level, the connections will be able to solve issues faster, or at least at the right level. Right, let's go to the next one. And of course, contract may be interpreted in a very different way than what we are used to. Again, this would be where they would expect, because of relationships, there should be some flexibility, because that's what's, again, the lubricating oil they're looking for. Right, so these are the relationship makers and breakers. And I would like to say that it is a sustained effort, and it is ongoing, so it is not transactional. It's not for the duration of the business you are doing. Of course, some of the things you can find out is a little bit of Indian history and culture. Of course, if you enjoy Indian food, that would be great to talk about it, and they'll be very happy to share further with you. Of course, business and personal as well as social topics are all part and parcel of the same conversation, so they're interwoven. And at times we think this is high maintenance. And of course, if you've got your businesses in different cities of India, it would be nice to know about the cities as well as the regional areas we have there. Breakers are, of course, quite obvious, that we tend to become quite impatient, so also not patronizing, making sure that we are not being commanding and showing as if they don't have any knowledge. They may be learning something, so you need to be more patient and showing respect for that. Of course, boasting would not be liked either, although in many contexts you'll see how Indians will use the names of connections they have to advance their businesses. So it's a bit of an irony there. And I talk about inflexibility, that means too many rules. Now, on that basis, I want to also remind everybody, I'm not asking you to break the rules, especially when it comes to corporate governance or safety, health, or security, or data protection. I would say we have to stick to that. But at times, everything is not black and white. There is also a gray matter, and one needs to be a bit flexible there. And one of the flexibilities which comes to my mind is about family, because family is so important. The Indian management know when somebody wants to take time off because of family reasons, whether it's celebrations or death or other things, they're much more willing. And because on the other hand, the employee also works very hard without having the work-life balance of how many hours he or she is putting in to bring in the results. So it's a two-way process between the management and the staff on this flexibility part. We now have communication challenges, which you have already alerted to me that you have the biggest ones are on the communication, 75%. But out of that, which one is the most challenging? Is it email, teleconference, group meetings, telephone, or any others? So I would let you take that, Sean.
All right, we're launching the poll here. If you could please respond, we'll give you a few seconds to vote. All right, nearly 70% of you have voted. We'll give you a few more seconds here. All right, let's take a look at the results here. 48%, nearly half of you tell us that teleconferences are the most challenging form of communication with India, followed by one-on-one telephone at 25%, group meetings at 16%, and email at 9%. We also have some other responses here. From Molly, actually from Andrew, teleconferences, because they tend to be unstructured. All right, thank you so much for your feedback, everyone. Back to you, Lakshmi.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Again, I'm not very surprised when you say 48% were teleconferences. Of course, I would love to ask the next question, which is, what are those? What is it? Is it because you don't get anyone speaking, or they're speaking over each other, or they're going into the local lingo? All those can be an issue. Or when you have too many silences, is it because the team lead or the manager is sitting there who is supposed to speak rather than anybody else? And regarding when you do one-to-one, it could be at times when you are giving them feedback, which could be a negative feedback. It could be taken very much as if you're giving a personal attack rather than on the task. And this is something I'd like to share, that Indian colleagues can be quite emotional, and therefore they take it as if a personal attack is given on them as a person rather than on the task. So I think one has to be very clear when you're giving negative feedback, exactly what are you concentrating. So be very fact-based. Even share that up front, that I'm going to be talking about the job which was done, which wasn't quite right because of these reasons. Go into reflective mode, asking what went right, what went wrong, and then I think you can be more safer in people not taking it personally. I would like to now continue by saying that in the communication, we tend to be more direct, whereby messages are very direct and very straightforward. Words count for the bigger meaning of the message, and we have yes or no questioning or yes and no answering. And but on the other side, which is indirect, messages tend to be quite subtle and very tactful, because if you remember, the values of relationships or hierarchy or context are involved. So those things itself allows it to be more subtle and tactful. Lots of non-verbal cues, so context plays a very big role here. And we might get lots of yeses and not that often no's. So we need to know whether the yes will mean a yes for us. Now, very good video which RW3 have produced is about the implications of communication from direct to indirect, and what kind of answers you're getting. This is a fantastic video to click and can see it, and this will talk about the importance of context and making sure that you have a complete buy-in so all of you are on the same page. And also it will share with you how the yes will be understood, or is it just understanding it, or is it just hearing something you've just said. No may be expressed very obliquely, which could be we'll consider it, or it might be difficult, or you might get lots of questions with it. And when you start getting too many questions, that means the understanding is not clear, or they are not able to do it. So I would like to say to you, if you get those kind of things coming up because the direct no is not there, I would like to ask you, let's start with square one again. So go through the whole scenario from basics until the understanding is there. And as I said earlier about feedback, especially when you're doing over the telephone feedback, because you can't see the body language and how people are feeling, or if you can do video, that would be great one-on-one. but it's very important that face has to be kept in check, and maybe a reflective way of asking, like a coaching style, would work very, very well. I would like to now ask you, I don't know how many of you, although there is no poll in this, but what are the multiple meanings of yes? And then how do you know a yes is a yes the way we understand it in this part of the world? So perhaps, Sean, they might give you some thoughts on this, and could you share them with me?
That's right. So everyone, if you could please send in your thoughts via the questions area. One response from Neil, in quotations, "I'll do my best." Another,
I want to know what that means.
What does that mean, "I'll do my best"? Damien tells us that to get a yes that you understand to be a true yes, the one that you want, is to get that also in writing. Another from Neil, "It's on my to-do list," in quotations. Dominique gives one that I've seen myself. "I will do the needful." The word needful quite interesting.
Those are Indianisms in English, by the way. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then from Trudy, "You are the boss, so my answer is yes, of course."
We've touched on that earlier. Okay.
From Arlene, there's one more here that's interesting from Arlene, "Silence."
Okay. If only I could speak to all of you and you could respond to me, we could have a really great debate on this. Well, let me share with you how would you know a yes is a yes. So the answer, like you are the boss, so the answer is yes. That means, of course, whatever you say, I'm going to do it. But even in that context or in that sentence, whoever it was, if it was Eileen or someone, may I please say, double check. That means check for understanding. And check for understanding is by using open-ended questions, which start with words like what, where, why, when, how, describe, explain. When you start any of these sentences with these words, nobody can, well, generally I wouldn't say, nobody would ever be able to say just yes to you. They would have to describe further, or they would have to explain further, or they might go through something which you will understand, and you will know whether they're on the same page and have they got a full understanding. Once you've had all that done, so you've checked for understanding by asking probing questions, which are coming up here, and some I've already mentioned, then it would really help you to understand that you are all both on the same page. But more than that, I would put an email together as to what was discussed and what were the action points, who's going to do it, and by when. But the email, you should have an input from your Indian colleagues as well. It's a two-way affair. So you need to get, it's not that you are just asking them and you've just written it down because you've had that understanding over the phone, but let them see it in writing so they can understand that this is what's expected of us and this is when we're going to be doing it. So you get an input with a confirmation. And this really does help. And we don't have firecrackers on deadline dates then. So this, I hope this will help you. And when you're verifying understanding, there are some more things to say here about paraphrasing. But please avoid, at all costs, closed questions like, do you understand? It begs an answer, yes or no. And if they never say no in general, then they're going to say yes, but you are none the wiser. So I would advise you, please, to keep open questions, and that really helps you. And in addition to each of the meetings, create that agenda and send the summary notes, but also receive the notes back as a confirmation so that all of you are working towards the same goal at the end. So what are some of these strategies for success? From an email perspective, although you don't have too much of an issue with emails, the only thing I can talk about, and I'm going to let you look at this, but I would like to share is that sometimes the emails can be very long, which means they're painting the context and the answer may be on the 4th page. If that is the case, which is happening in your situation, I suggest as teams you create a protocol of how the email should be written. Of course, we are talking about how in an email, you begin with a social chit-chat on a personal level. So if you knew they were going to a wedding the previous weekend, maybe to ask how the wedding was, etc. However, if you're writing to that same person or the same team 5 times in a day, I wouldn't expect, or they wouldn't even expect you to write the little chit-chat. And signing off with a sincerity of greeting or having the nice weekend or evening or whatever would also be very nice, because this is showing that you're working as teams and there is a relationship between the two parties. Again, in teleconferences, the impact of hierarchy becomes very, very big. So when you're looking for brainstorming, and if it's not happening a lot, could it be that it was a team lead sitting in that meeting, so was the manager, and therefore the 2 speakers will be only the two people? Or if they're talking over each other, because there's a lot of conversation going on and you can't make head or tail, my suggestion again would be creating a protocol for a teleconference where in the agenda everybody is invited to speak, say we're all looking forward to speaking to each other, but also introduction of that individual, so you start learning what that sound is of that person in the sense of his accent or his language, and you can relate with whether it's Ajay or Ramesh talking to you, and then vice versa for yourself, introductions as well as slowing down, pausing, and requesting that we will be looking for the subject matter expert to share with us information. This allows upfront to the manager and to the team that everybody can contribute towards this conversation. Of course, when you're using video conferences or graphics, WebEx, etc., this of course already enhances the communication because it's in a picture format, and video conference you can actually see the body language as well as tone plus words. I would say in the meetings, if you're meeting people face to face, which I guess some of you will be, look out for not the what is being said, it's the how it is being said, which is the context and the body language. Meetings could be very formal, depending on what the relationships have been, but if the management are sitting there, there is very little pushback with leaders if in case there is a difference of opinion by the subordinate. So they will not push back in the meeting, but one-on-one you can have a conversation with them and find out. Because this leads to loss of face, and face is very important, not only for the individual concerned, but also for the manager and the group involved in it. And all the roles should be identified in advance, so we already know who's going to be sitting and what kind of interaction we will be having. And at times, as I said earlier, one-on-one does really help. But again, I'm repeating something I said earlier. The relationships, the stronger the relationships and sustainable relationships will bring you many more results than just the conference calls or otherwise. So I would say focus on that part of the relationship creation, and you might get a lot, even to a point that they might even ring you beforehand for sharing the lack of a deadline or whatever it is. So what are some of the further strategies of what we have been speaking about? Intensive management is viewed for the most time as good management. So, not hands-off approach or they can manage it, or let's not teach granny how to suck eggs. You may have to share detail with people before they can be on their own. Don't forget they've not done your jobs before. They're now helping you as a team to work, so they need learning time being built in. Please clarify with very explicit written checklists so that it is understood. Using the KISS principle, I would like to use the word, keeping it short and simple, asking lots of open-ended questions so that if you don't, because you won't get a no, you don't always get a yes. So checks for understanding. And also, in any culture when we work, whether I'm working with India or any other culture, we should not make assumptions. Everybody is an individual, and there are individual differences. And we should be focusing on that, because in some places, for some colleagues of yours, you don't have to repeat anything. You never have to ask check for understanding type of questions. When he says yes, he actually delivers it. It is to the point and the way it is done. So I would say in our training language, we say horses for courses. So you adapt to the way the party on the other side is working with you, and also ask for input. because they may not openly give you unsolicited feedback because they feel you know better, you're the boss, or you're higher than them, there's a position you are holding, or you may be older than them, so that means you have to share the information. Further strategies for success will be clarifying all the terminology. So if you have particular slangs, jargon you use in your work, in your country, make sure everybody's on the same page on the other side of the world as well. Create those kind of regular conversations, I would like to use the word, rather than just feedback on an email or something, because this starts strengthening to build business, relationships, but follow up more frequently than you would do with your home country, and creating those tracking and milestones, which is very important so that the deadlines are met and we don't have big surprises. Develop, of course, a backup plan just in case technology fails, or there could be strikes in certain parts of India where they're very prone to strikes, and there may be that could be the issue. Of course, you are asking questions in several different ways, whether you're paraphrasing, you're checking for understanding by those open questions, so therefore you really know where you are and how it has been understood. If you still feel lots of questions are coming back with question after question to you, that means you may have to go back to square one to start from the beginning, and also prepare the what-if scenarios to drive the extra change you're looking for. So we now come to that end, almost the end part, which is the personal action planning. And so these are some of your things you will be looking at amongst the values, which in India are the hierarchy, the way the communication is done, which is indirect. So how are you going to phrase the questions? In the hierarchy, who will you approach? Who is the decision maker? Do you have the organization chart? India is very much a group culture, although it is also becoming very competitive, individualistic culture, especially with Generation Y. And there are generational differences not only in India, but in all our cultures. We work right across remotely with everyone. So you have to look out for that to make sure, are they empowered to make the decision, or does someone else make the decision on the project? Relationships and that trust. Creating those relationships which are sustainable and regular will create a lot of trust, and this will help enormously in every way, which I call it the trump card. And we go into formality, and if people have titles like doctor, let's refer to them like that, because in our culture, which is quite egalitarian, we call everybody by their first names. They may not like that. They may expect someone to respect them for what they have earned. Time is a fantastic concept in India. We call it the Indian stretchable time. But if the relationships have been built, I can tell you that time becomes a very, very tiny, tight elastic, which means you get information well in advance of what you even wanted. And, if you have the urgency, you need to explain the context, the implications, the consequences, not only for themselves and how it works with you, but as an organization in total. And also risk, how is it managed, and how are you approaching change with it? And of course, motivators in every culture. Having worked in 28 cultures, I can tell you as an HR director, I did find the motivators were very, very different in Europe. Even within Europe, I had different motivators as I had in Asia. So really need to understand what are the motivators for people across the world. And finally, we are looking at what you have on your mobile, which you can have the Culture Wizard on your mobile. And so how will you apply this? What are some of the top learnings you've had about India? Maybe, Sean, if we've got a few minutes, is it possible for them to just give you some thoughts about this?
That would be lovely. So if any of you would write us using the questions box, why don't we talk about the top things that you'd like to do differently as a result of sitting here with Lakshmi today and learning about India? Could you tell us what you think you'll do differently, or how you will apply this information?
Thank you.
Morgan tells us that he'd like to take the time to provide background and context. Dominique is going to probe more, asking probing questions. Neil will create backup plans.
Excellent.
Jenny is actually going to pick up the phone more to give the teams a call and have a chat.
Okay.
Really good. Agnes is going to be more personal while communicating, focusing on the interpersonal side of the
Oh, wow. Okay.
Andrew is going to be going to India on holiday soon, so he's going to take advantage of that to understand India better through that visit.
Excellent.
Oh, and wow, and Pierre is going to go and live in India for a short period of time to develop relationships. That is excellent.
Can you take me with him, please?
So I'll go with him. And
Okay.
then one more here. Karina is going to take more time over communications, and we'll use open-ended questions. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm really, really pleased with some of the fantastic responses you've given me. I'd like to ask if there are any further questions. So we've got about, I think, 5 or 7 minutes now, around 8 minutes or so, or 9 minutes, I think, left. So I would like to open the floor now to ask if you have any further questions which we haven't covered or you have had challenges.
I already have a few questions from throughout the session that I've saved here, Lakshmi, so I'd like to go ahead and ask. The first one here is from Agnes, and she tells us that she's working with a number of Indian assignees, international assignees, who are going on their first assignment ever, and they have a very different sense of urgency from her, which I'm assuming from a Western perspective, and they tend to call her team very frequently, every 10 to 15 minutes, asking for an update on the details of their assignment. So the question here is, how can we convey to them effectively that we are working on their moves, on their relocations, and how can they assure their Indian assignees that there is no need for such frequent calls without offending them, of course?
Of course. Very, very good question. Was it Agnes who said this?
That's correct, yes, Agnes.
Okay. Agnes, answering you and anyone else listening to the same, who wants the same answer, I would like to say, why don't you just keep an update, keep a frequent update with them, that you are being proactive by giving them the update. And also, when you have started the relationship with them for this move, is to say to them, so manage their expectation by saying, by the way, certain things will take X number of weeks or days, and others will take less. We will keep you updated and posted. Of course, if there's anything very urgent, feel free to call us. Otherwise, we'll be keeping you updated. So maybe creating a log of something which you're going to be keeping them updated. If there's no news, a lovely smiley face will be there. Or if there are things happening, then you need to tell them that they need to respond very fast as well. So I think this may avoid this constant pressure you're going to get of someone chasing you. Because for them, they're moving, they want the urgency because they feel, any international move is a pretty chaotic and very stressful time because they could be moving with their families. So I think sharing that up front with them, that, showing your empathy and that you are aware of what it takes, that we will do our very best and keep them updated. I hope this helps you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. That was wonderful. And to the rest of you, please submit any further questions that you'd like to ask Lakshmi using the questions area of the GoToWebinar dashboard. Now, here's another question from Andrew. His biggest challenge is being told what you want to hear, which is oftentimes very different from what is reality. So there's an issue there about how does one get assurance that the answers they're receiving are realistic. For example, the timeline for delivery of a project, for example.
Wonderful question again. Andrew, one big thing you can do is create some tracking system, frequently checking. So when you give the project as to what the deadline is, you can upfront say that I'll be checking with you every 2 days. If you have that information ready, you can even post it on the WebEx or share it with me on an email or video or whatever. And from your side your side, you need to keep that tracking, which is going to be more frequent. The milestones are going to be more frequent than you would have done in this country or whichever country you're working in. And then you will know that things are happening at the level you want. And when you are asking them, if in case you can't have anything sent by pictures or graphics, I suggest you ask them very open-ended questions by asking them to tell you exactly what they have done, up to which point, what are the other obstacles they're getting, or what other resources do they require. When it is frequent, it allows you to know where you are and whether you're going to be meeting the deadline. Otherwise, you get, unfortunately, not very good surprises on the deadline date or the night before. I hope this will help you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Wonderful advice there. And Andrew just sent his thank yous. He's a great answer. Thank you, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
Allison has another question here, a really interesting one. What would you summarize as the key challenges for Indians working within Western companies and with Western managers and colleagues?
Okay. I often get this question as well. Okay. So the biggest challenge they find, they feel that we are too aggressive. We are too time-bound. We never have time for any social interactions or any form of relationships because everything is work-related. And they also find at times we speak very fast. They don't also sometimes know, if you don't speak often to people, they don't even know our names, as we don't know their names, whether they are male or female. So one of the things I want to tell everyone is, perhaps when you're working regularly with your team, why don't you send your team photographs to them and receive theirs? This in itself brings even better relationships, because now you know he's a man, or this is where she comes from, etc. And you can even create a little bit of fun within the teams, as to just saying, okay, let's write 5 points about ourselves. And there's a company I work with, which is, they work in 6 different cultures. I've been working with them since 2008. And they have created this team spirit on a remote basis by sharing every month someone is picked from that team to talk about themselves. And this starts creating good relationships. And it will help tremendously in working together. I hope this has helped you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. And one more question here from Molly. She's just interested if you could go into some more detail around how Indian hierarchy manifests itself in the workplace. Any more details around the dimension of hierarchy that you can share that would be important to Western?
Excellent question again. You know, if we were to have a face-to-face conversation with you or had a training together, I would have gone to the backdrop of culture, which is talking about why the hierarchy has started. It starts from the idea in the old days of caste system, where people at the most higher levels had more authority, the next level, and so forth. And then it also manifests itself from the family background, where the father or the mother, in fact, the father is the topmost person, the next is mother, and all to the grandparents if they're living together, because many people live joint families. And the same thing is depicted in school when they're being taught at school, so the teacher knows best kind of idea, and she's the hierarchy. Same as in colleges where professors are the hierarchy, and then it manifests itself in the workplace. And this part, I would like to say, as much as we think we should not have it, because in our culture we don't have it, I cannot change the cultural iceberg in another culture, as I cannot change our cultural iceberg in this part of the world. So what will help us to understand and make it more effective is if we understand that this hierarchy will remain, but there are ways of working effectively, such as knowing the org chart, who's making the decisions, being respectful, making sure that they are copied in, especially when it comes to recognition. I think it's very important people are copied in with their managers, because that's a big motivator in itself. That will help us already in managing the hierarchy, because I cannot change their structure just because our company is very flat over this side. I hope this helps.
Thank you, Lakshmi. And that's about all the time that we have today for questions. I would like to just mention that if you do have further questions, here on the last slide of our presentation is my email address, sean.deburk@rw-3.com. Send any comments or questions there. And once again, a reminder that you can now download the Culture Wizard app from the Apple App Store in iTunes or from the Android App Store. It's brand new, and you can access all of the country profiles, including the country profile for India, which contains nearly 60 articles written specifically on doing business in India, in addition to your own personal cultural profiles and the plethora of other resources that will be at your fingertips on the go. So you can truly work smarter with anyone, anywhere. Please go ahead and download that. It's free, and if you're already registered for Culture Wizard, you just simply enter the email address that you use to access Culture Wizard on your desktops, and you'll have all of that information on your smartphones. Of course, we will be sending a copy of this presentation, in addition to a recording of this session, to all of you and anyone who did register within a week. So please look for that email so you can revisit these important topics, and we hope that you'll continue to learn about India and the rest of the world through Culture Wizard and by attending our future Cultural Wisdom webinars. The next one will be in November on building high-performing global teams, and again, we will be sending out an invitation to invite you to that within the next few weeks. Lakshmi, thank you so much for this informative session. It's always a pleasure and very interesting to listen to your insights. So thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for participating.
And I want to say thank you to all of you, and also namaste, which is a greeting for saying thank you and goodbye in Hindi. Bye-bye then.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Goodbye.